All right, military history fans. Welcome back to another deep dive. We're really excited about this one. It's a period that's full of, clashes and changes and all kinds of stuff. It's the fall of the Western Roman Empire and the rise of all these so-called barbarian kingdoms.
It's a really dynamic period.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about the amount of change that happened over just a couple hundred years, it's really remarkable, and it's also a period that we've got a ton of sources for.
yeah, and we do. We've got maps, we've got timelines, we've got firsthand accounts, and we're going to use all that stuff to try to, unpack how all this happened and what it meant for the future of Europe.
I think one of the things that's so interesting about it is that it wasn't just about brute force. There are
Yeah.
all these clashes of ideologies and cultures and military strategies, and I think that's what makes it so fascinating. And it all kind of starts to unravel with one event,
Okay.
the Visigoth sack of Rome in 410 AD.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember reading about this in school. Like the eternal city brought to its knees by these barbarian hordes.
Right. And it was a real shock to the Roman psyche. You know, for centuries, Rome had been this invincible force
Right.
dictating the terms of engagement. And all of a sudden,
Are on the defensive.
they're on the defensive. Exactly. But here's where it gets interesting. The Visigoths, led by Alaric, they weren't just mindlessly pillaging.
Okay.
There was a method to their madness, a calculated strategy at play.
So they weren't just your average smash and grab raiders.
Not at all. I mean, for one thing, they spared churches amidst the chaos.
Really?
Even really important ones like St. Peter's Basilica.
Hmm.
This wasn't just random chance. It actually reflects the spread of Christianity amongst the Visigoths, specifically a branch known as Arian Christianity.
Arian Christianity. I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, it might sound unfamiliar now, but it was a major branch of Christianity back then.
Okay.
The key difference with Roman Catholicism was their view of the Trinity. The Arians didn't believe that Jesus was fully divine.
Interesting.
And this wasn't just an academic debate either. It had huge political implications.
Wow.
It created a divide between the Visigoths and the Roman Empire.
So we're already seeing how religion adds this whole other layer of complexity to these conflicts.
Absolutely.
But if even the quote-unquote barbarians were adopting Christianity, why did so many Romans see Christianity as a cause for Rome's decline?
Well, that's where perception and propaganda come in. After the sack of Rome, a lot of Romans felt abandoned by their traditional gods.
Right.
They saw the rise of Christianity as a sign of weakness, a reason for their misfortune. It created this crisis of faith within the empire.
So they're looking for someone to blame.
Exactly.
Right.
When things go wrong, find a scapegoat.
Yeah, it's a tale as old as time.
Right. But in this case, a very prominent Christian bishop named Augustine steps in to try to counter this narrative.
Augustine. Wasn't he the guy who came up with the 7 deadly sins?
He did indeed.
Wow.
And he's considered one of the most influential thinkers in Christian history.
I can see why.
But back to Augustine.
Yeah.
So he writes this incredibly powerful work called The City of God. And in it, he reframes this whole idea of a Christian's place in the world. He basically argues that Christians belong not to an earthly city like Rome, but to a heavenly one.
So he's saying Rome might fall, but
Exactly. Don't panic, folks. Our true home is eternal.
that's one way to spin it.
Yeah. And to kind of bolster his point, Augustine also highlights the internal rot within Roman society. He points to moral decay and political instability as contributing factors to the empire's decline. And this work had a lasting impact.
I bet.
It really shaped how Christians viewed hardship and resilience for centuries to come.
So one book written in response to this one event ends up influencing the course of religious thought for generations.
It really shows you the power of ideas,
It does.
especially in times of turmoil. But let's not forget about the Visigoths. Their story doesn't end with the sack of Rome. In fact, it's really just the beginning of their rise to power.
Right. They don't just disappear after their Roman holiday.
No, they don't.
So they go on to establish their own kingdom.
They do. And here's where it gets really interesting. So in 419 AD, the Visigothic kingdom is established in southern Gaul. And get this, it's officially recognized by the Roman Emperor Honorius.
Wait, the Roman emperor gives the thumbs up to a rival kingdom carved out of his own territory.
It might seem counterintuitive, but Honorius was likely playing a strategic game here.
Oh, way.
The Western Roman Empire was already weakened
Right.
by internal struggles and external pressures. He probably saw recognizing the Visigoths as a way to potentially gain an ally,
Against other.
especially against other groups vying for power.
So it's like a desperate gamble. You're so weak, you make deals with the very people who sacked your capital.
It really highlights the complex dynamics of power at play.
It does.
You know, Honorius may have hoped to use the Visigoths to help reclaim control over Spain, which at the time was a chaotic mix of various barbarian groups, Vandals, Alans, Suebi, you name it.
Spain, too. So we're talking about domino effect here.
Exactly.
One part of the Roman world falls, and it creates this ripple effect across the entire region.
Right. And amidst all this chaos, there's another factor that can't be ignored. The state of the Roman army itself. Remember, this was once the most formidable fighting force in the world. But by this point...
It was a shadow of its former self.
Exactly.
So what happened? Did they just forget how to train soldiers, run out of swords and shields?
It was more about systemic issues. There were internal power struggles that diverted resources.
Okay.
Soldiers were going unpaid due to financial strain.
Oh.
And there was this growing reliance on Germanic recruits, whose loyalty was, shall we say, questionable.
Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster.
Right. And I bet the Eastern Roman Empire was watching all of this unfold with a mix of horror and maybe a little bit of told you so.
Right. Like, we're doing okay over here, guys.
Yeah.
How are things in the West?
Exactly. Well, the East certainly had its own challenges, but they were a world away from the turmoil engulfing the West. While the Western Roman Empire teetered on the brink, the East, under Emperor Arcadius, and later his son Theodosius II, enjoyed a period of relative stability. Their strategic location, strong defenses, and economic resources provided a buffer against the immediate chaos.
So it's almost like two different realities playing out simultaneously.
Right.
One half of the empire crumbling, the other clinging to some semblance of order. And all this is happening as these various barbarian groups are making their moves across Europe. What a time to be alive. But wait, there's one major player we haven't even mentioned yet.
Oh, yeah.
The Huns.
The Huns. They were this growing force on the horizon, a storm gathering strength.
Right.
And in 434 AD, a new leader emerges from their ranks.
Okay.
A man named Attila, who will change the course of history forever.
Attila the Hun. Saying his name sends chills down my spine.
Well, but what made him so different from other Hunnic leaders? What transformed him from a tribal chieftain into the scourge of God?
Well, this is where his upbringing comes in.
Attila spent part of his youth as a hostage in Rome, learning their language, their customs, and crucially, their military tactics.
Hold on. He was learning from the very people he'd later terrorize. That's like giving the fox the keys to the henhouse.
It's fascinating, isn't it? He witnessed Roman military might firsthand, their organization discipline, strategic thinking. He wasn't just observing, he was absorbing knowledge, understanding both the strengths and weaknesses of the empire he'd later challenge.
Wow. So we've got this new player on the board, Attila the Hun, armed with Roman knowledge and ambition to spare. This is where things are going to get really interesting, right?
Oh, yeah. Attila's rise marks a turning point, a shift from these localized conflicts to a much larger struggle for dominance. He understood that to challenge Rome, the Huns needed more than just ferocity. They needed strategy, organization, and a leader capable of uniting these disparate tribes under a single banner.
This starting to feel like a real clash of civilizations brewing. So how does Attila make his move? Does he just launch a full-scale invasion of the Roman Empire right off the bat?
He's more cunning than that. He starts by consolidating his power base among the Hunnic tribes,
Okay.
eliminating rivals, establishing his authority. Then he focuses on the Eastern Roman Empire, launching a series of raids into the Balkans in the 440s.
Okay.
And these weren't just hit-and-run attacks. They were calculated probes, testing defenses, amassing wealth, sowing fear.
So he's playing the long game, weakening his opponents and building up his own forces. How did the Eastern Roman Empire respond to these provocations?
Well, they tried to buy him off with tribute, essentially paying him to go away.
Did it work?
And it worked for a time.
Okay.
But Attila was a master negotiator, always pushing for more. He saw these payments not as peace offerings, but as signs of weakness, emboldening him to demand even greater concessions.
Classic bully tactic, right? Give them an inch and they'll take a mile. So how long did this game of cat and mouse go on for? When did Attila finally set his sights on the Western Roman Empire, the ultimate prize?
That comes a bit later, triggered by a rather unexpected event. In 451 AD, Honoria, the sister of the Western Roman Emperor Valentinian III, sends a desperate plea for help to Attila, along with her engagement ring.
Wait, a Roman princess proposing to Attila the Hun? Was she insane, desperate, or maybe a little bit of both?
Probably a combination of factors. Honoria was facing an unwanted marriage arranged by her brother. She saw Attila as a potential savior, someone powerful enough to defy her brother and perhaps even secure her a share of power.
Talk about a high-stakes gamble.
Right.
And how did Attila interpret this unexpected proposal?
He saw it as an opportunity, a way to claim a legitimate right to half of the Western Roman Empire.
A dowry fit for a king, or in this case, the scourge of God? This
Yeah.
changes everything, right?
Absolutely. It gives Attila the perfect excuse to launch his long-awaited westward campaign. So in 451, he leads his forces. Now, a massive horde composed not just of Huns, but also subjugated Germanic tribes across the Rhine River and into Gaul, the heartland of the Western Roman Empire.
This is it. The moment we've been building towards a clash of titans that will determine the fate of the Western Roman Empire. What happens next? Who steps up to face this seemingly unstoppable force?
Well, there's one name I mentioned earlier that you should remember, Aetius, the last great general of the Western Roman Empire. He understood that to have any chance against Attila, he needed to forge alliances. And so he reaches out to the Visigoths, the very people who had sacked Rome just a few decades earlier.
Wow. Talk about enemies becoming friends in the face of a common threat.
Yeah.
So it's Romans and Visigoths against Attila and his Hunnic horde. Where does this epic showdown take place?
The decisive battle takes place near a place called the Catalonian Plains in modern-day France. It's one of the largest and most brutal battles in European history, with tens of thousands, perhaps even hundreds of thousands of warriors clashing in a desperate struggle for survival.
I bet the ground shook that day. So who emerged victorious from this epic clash? Did Attila's reign of terror come to an end on the Catalonian Plains?
The outcome is a bit more nuanced than a clear-cut victory. Tactically, the Roman-Visigothic alliance held their ground. They inflicted heavy losses on the Huns. But Attila, ever the pragmatist, managed to escape with a significant portion of his forces regrouping and living to fight another day.
Okay, so not a total victory, but a major setback for Attila. Does he retreat back east, licking his wounds and plotting his revenge?
Not if you know Attila. He's not one to give up easily. In fact, just a year later, in 452 AD, he invades Italy, bypassing the heavily defended Gaul and striking at the heart of the Western Roman Empire.
So the scourge of God is back with a vengeance. What was his target this time? Was Rome itself in danger?
It was a very real possibility. Attila's forces reached as far as the Po Valley, putting them within striking distance of the former imperial capital. Panic gripped the city as people feared a repeat of the 410 sack. In a desperate attempt to avert disaster, Pope Leodros, along with other prominent citizens, went to negotiate with Attila.
A desperate plea for mercy from the heart of Christendom. Did Attila listen? Did he spare the city that has once been the symbol of his enemy's power?
Surprisingly, yes. He agreed to withdraw from Italy, although the exact reasons for his decision remain shrouded in mystery.
So Rome is spared, but at what cost did Attila demand a hefty ransom for his retreat?
He likely did, though. The details are lost to history. What we do know is that Attila's withdrawal from Italy marked a turning point in his reign of terror. He never again launched such a large-scale invasion into Roman territory.
So what happened to Attila? Did he finally retire, content with the wealth and fear he'd instilled across Europe?
His reign of terror was surprisingly short-lived. In 453 AD, just a year after his Italian campaign, he died under mysterious circumstances.
A fittingly dramatic end for the scourge of God. But what happened to his vast empire after his death? Did it continue to threaten Rome and the rest of Europe?
It fractured almost immediately. Attila's sons fought over succession, weakening the Hunnic grip on their subject tribes. Within a few years, the once mighty Hunnic Empire had essentially collapsed.
Wow, what a rapid rise and fall. So with Attila gone and the Huns scattered, what's the state of the Western Roman Empire at this point? Did they manage to recover from all this chaos?
The Western Roman Empire was unfortunately on its last legs. While Attila's death removed an immediate threat, it didn't solve the underlying problems: internal strife, economic woes, and constant pressure from other migrating groups. The scene was set for the final act in the fall of the Western Roman Empire.
A sobering thought, even for a seasoned military history enthusiast like myself. But wait, we haven't talked much about the Visigoths since they helped defeat Attila at the Catalonian Plains. What happened to them? Did they just go back to their kingdom in Spain?
They did, and their role in shaping the post-Roman world was far from over. In fact, their story highlights how the collapse of one empire often creates opportunities for others to rise.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Looks like we're going to have to dive into another fascinating chapter of history next time. Join us as we explore the Visigothic kingdom in Spain, their unique blend of Roman and Germanic culture, and their lasting legacy on the Iberian Peninsula.
It's a story of adaptation, resilience, and ultimately the birth of new identities from the ashes of the old.
Can't wait. See you all next time.
It's kind of wild to think about, right? Attila learning the ropes in Rome.
Yeah, like almost poetic.
Poetic in a kind of messed up way, like this young warrior surrounded by Roman power and culture, soaking it all and learning the ins and outs of their whole system, but as their captive.
Must have been a lot going on in his head.
Yeah. Like, was he in awe or resentful or both? Maybe he saw how strong Rome was, but also how they were cracking internally, their complex systems, maybe even their weaknesses.
Like maybe he thought, I can do this better, build something stronger.
Exactly. And that's what he does. He gets back to the Huns. And he's not just some leader. He's got this vision to turn them from a loose bunch into a force that can take on Rome.
Starting with getting everyone on the same page, right?
Yeah, first things first. He had to become the undisputed leader of the Huns. He shared power with his brother Bleda, but within a few years, Attila's calling the shots. How that went down. Well, the details are murky, but Attila didn't get the Scourge of God nickname for being a pushover.
Ambition and ruthlessness. Two sides of the same coin, right? Especially back then. But how did he take these Hunnic tribes and turn them into this massive threat to Rome? They weren't exactly known for their organization, were they?
He knew that to take on Rome, you needed more than just being fierce horsemen. They needed discipline coordination, a clear command structure. So he restructures the Hunnic tribes, bringing them under his control, uniting them with a shared purpose.
Sounds like he learned a few things from the Romans.
It happens all the time. Leaders taking notes from their rivals, adapting strategies to fit their own needs.
But once he's got everything in place,
Yeah.
where does Attila strike first? Does he go right for the big prize, the Western Roman Empire?
Not quite. He's strategic about it, picks his battles carefully. So first, he sets his sights on the Eastern Roman Empire, launching raids into the Balkans around the 440s.
Interesting. So he goes for the wealthier, more stable part of the empire first? Was there a reason for that?
Absolutely. The East was a prime target. Rich cities' defenses maybe not as strong. By raiding there, Attila could get rich, test Roman defenses, and see how much they were willing to fight back. It was a calculated move, a way to find weak spots and take advantage.
And what was the Eastern Roman response? Did they try to stop him head on, or did they go a different route?
First, they tried the diplomatic approach, and more importantly, tribute, basically paying Attila to leave them alone. It had worked before for the Romans against other groups.
So trying to buy some peace and quiet. Hoping Attila takes the money and runs. Did it work?
For a while, Attila was practical. He'd take the money, but always wanted more. He saw it as weakness, that they were afraid to fight him. It just made him bolder and ask for even more.
Yeah, you give an inch, they take a mile. So how long did this back and forth last? When did Attila finally decide to go for the ultimate target, the Western Roman Empire?
It was a bit later, and it was sparked by a rather unexpected event. In 451 AD, Honoria, the sister of the Western Roman Emperor Valentinian III, sends a message to Attila begging for help. And get this, she includes her engagement ring.
Wait, a Roman princess proposing to Attila the Hun? Was she crazy or just that desperate?
Probably a mix of both. See, Honoria was being forced into a marriage by her brother. She saw Attila as a way out. Someone powerful enough to stand up to her brother and maybe even give her some power.
Talk about a risky move.
Absolutely.
So what did Attila make of this whole proposal thing? Did he take it seriously or did he have other ideas?
He saw it as a golden opportunity. A chance to claim half of the Western Roman Empire. The Huns had this tradition of demanding a bride price for a princess. And Attila decided that ring, well, that is a down payment on half the Roman world.
Wow, what a dowry. So he uses this to justify invading the West. It's happening, the clash of civilizations we've been talking about.
Yeah,
It's about to go down.
And it does. In 451, Attila sets his sights on Gaul, the heart of the Western Roman Empire. And he's not messing around. He gathers this massive army, not just Huns, but also warriors from all the Germanic tribes he conquered. They're all in on this, ready to get their share of the loot.
So it's not just a Hunnic invasion. It's this multi-ethnic force, a mega army united under Attila. Who on earth is going to stop this?
Well, remember Aetius, the Roman general? We talked about him earlier. He knew that Rome couldn't take on Attila alone. So he does something unthinkable. He reaches out to the Visigoths, the very people who sacked Rome decades earlier.
Wow. Setting aside old rivalries for the greater good.
Yeah.
So now it's Romans and Visigoths against Attila and his horde. It's like the ultimate team-up. Where does this epic showdown happen?
The battle that decides everything takes place near the Catalonian plains in modern-day France. It's one for the history books. One of the biggest and most brutal battles ever fought in Europe. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of warriors clashing. It was a fight for survival.
Can't even imagine the chaos and carnage. So who wins? Does Attila's reign of terror end right there?
It's not that simple. The Roman-Visigothic alliance, they hold their own, inflict heavy losses on the Huns, but Attila, he's a survivor. He escapes with a lot of his forces, ready to fight another day.
Okay, so a win for Rome and the Visigoths, but not a knockout blow. Does Attila go back east to regroup?
Not a chance. He doesn't give up that easily. Just a year later, in 452, he invades Italy. He goes around Gaul, which was heavily defended, and strikes right at the heart of the Western Roman Empire.
He's back with a vengeance. So is Rome itself in danger this time?
It's a real possibility. His forces get as far as the Po Valley. That puts them within striking distance of Rome. Everyone's panicking. They think it's going to be like 410 all over again. So Pope Leo I and some other important people, they go out to try and reason with Attila.
A last-ditch effort to save Rome from the scourge of God. Did Attila listen? Did he show mercy?
You know what he did? He agrees to leave Italy. And we're still not sure why.
So Rome is saved, but at what cost? I'm guessing Attila didn't do it out of the kindness of his heart.
No, probably not. Details are scarce, but he probably got a huge payout from the Romans.
Yes.
What we do know is this was a turning point for Attila. He never tries another massive invasion of Roman territory again.
So what happened to him? Did he just retire and enjoy his riches and the fear he'd created?
His reign didn't last much longer. In 453, just a year after the whole Italy thing, he dies. And it's shrouded in mystery. Some say it was a nosebleed on his wedding night. Others think his own men got rid of him. Whatever happened, his death changed everything for the Hunnic Empire.
So Attila, this almost mythical figure, this force of nature, is gone. Just like that. What happened to his empire after he died?
It fell apart almost instantly. Without Attila's leadership and his military skills, the empire fractured. His sons started fighting each other, which just made things worse. Within a few years, that empire that had terrorized Europe was basically gone.
Talk about a rise and fall. So with Attila gone, the Huns scattered, what about the Western Roman Empire? Did they bounce back after all that?
Sadly, no, they were too far gone. By then, Attila's invasions had sped things up, but the empire was already collapsing. Internal fighting, a failing economy, other groups pushing at the borders, it was all adding up.
So even though Attila was out of the picture, the underlying problems were still there. It was just a matter of time.
Yeah. It was the beginning of the end for the Western Roman Empire, a turning point that would change Europe forever.
It's amazing to think how all of this, these battles, these leaders, they shape the world we live in today.
It really does. And it makes you wonder, what if Attila had lived longer? What if he'd taken Rome? Would things be different now?
Those are the questions historians will be debating for years to come. But one thing's certain, the fall of the Western Roman Empire and the rise of these barbarian kingdoms. It's a story full of drama, ambition, and twists you don't see coming.
And speaking of twists and turns, let's get back to the Visigoths, those former enemies of Rome who played a huge part in stopping Attila.
Yeah, what happened to them after they helped defeat Attila at the Catalonian plains? They went back to their kingdom in Spain, right? But that wasn't the end of their story, was it?
Not even close. They actually had a big impact on what came after the Roman Empire. Their story shows how when one empire falls, it can create opportunities for others to rise.
Okay, now I'm really interested. Tell me more about this Visigothic kingdom in Spain. What was their society like? How did they rule? And what did they leave behind?
Well, that's a story for our next deep dive. Stick with us as we explore the Visigothic kingdom in Spain, a realm that rose from the ashes of the Roman Empire and played a key role in shaping the Iberian Peninsula.
Okay, so we're back in Spain with the Visigoths. Those guys who, sacked Rome.
Yeah, they got a bit of a rep for that, don't they?
Yeah, kind of hard to shake that image.
Seen as these barbarian destroyers. But like we've talked about, there's more to them than that.
Right, they weren't just tearing things down, they were building too. Creating a whole kingdom in Spain, blending Roman and Germanic traditions.
It's a classic example of how cultures mix together when different societies collide, especially after empires collapse. The Visigoths didn't just erase Roman influence. They took it and combined it with their own customs and ideas, made something new.
A real cultural mashup. So what did that look like in everyday life? Roman villas next to Germanic longhouses, people speaking Latin with a Germanic accent.
It was a gradual thing, but you can see it in different parts of their society. Roman-style architecture and cities alongside traditional Germanic settlements, and their legal system. It was based a lot on Roman law, but with Visigothic customs and traditions mixed in.
So they weren't afraid to take what worked from the Romans and make it their own. What about language? Did they keep speaking Latin, or did their Germanic language take over?
This is interesting. They developed their own type of Latin in Visigothic Spain called Vulgar Latin. Basically Roman Latin, but with a lot of Germanic words and pronunciation thrown in. It shows how language changes adapts when it meets other languages.
So they're mixing things up with architecture laws,
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
What about religion? They were Arian Christians, right? Different from the Roman version. Did they stick with that?
That's where things get really interesting. In 589 AD, their king Recared makes a huge decision. He converts to Catholicism.
Wow, he switches teams.
Yeah.
Goes from Arian Christianity to Roman Catholic. What was that about? A genuine conversion, or was there more to it?
Probably both. He was a smart ruler. He knew that becoming Catholic would make his kingdom stronger, aligning with the major power in Western Europe, bring him closer to powerful neighbors like the Franks. It would also calm things down at home, where Arianism was causing division.
So it's a power move, strengthening his position both inside and outside the kingdom. But I'm guessing not everyone was thrilled about this change.
You're right. There were some Visigothic nobles who wanted to keep the old Arian beliefs, but Recared was determined to unify his kingdom. He held church councils to hash out the theological issues, put down any Arian resistance, even had Arian writings burned.
Wow, talk about a religious overhaul. He really went all in on making Catholicism the main religion. So now we've got a Visigothic kingdom that's Catholic, Roman influenced, and becoming a bigger player in Western Europe. What happens next? World domination.
Not quite. History is never that simple. The Visigothic kingdom lasted for a while. They had good times and bad times. Stability and prosperity, but also internal struggles and pressure from outside.
So it wasn't all sunshine and roses.
No, they had to deal with rebellious nobles, power struggles, attacks from other groups. But even with all that, they left a lasting legacy, especially their legal code, the Visigothic Code.
What's so special about this Visigothic code?
It was a big deal. It was this comprehensive set of laws based on Roman law, but with Visigothic customs and traditions added in. It covered everything from crime and property rights to family matters and inheritance.
So it's not just copy-paste from Rome. They're creating a system that reflects their unique mix of cultures. Did this code have any influence on later legal systems?
It did. It was a foundation for later laws in Spain, influenced Spanish law, and even had some impact on legal traditions in other parts of Europe. It shows how influential this kingdom was.
So they've got a vibrant culture, a complex legal system, and they're making their mark on Western Europe. But if they were doing so well, how did it all end for them?
That's when a new force enters the picture, the Islamic conquests of the 8th century AD.
Right, the Muslim armies coming from North Africa. Talk about a game changer for the Iberian Peninsula.
It just goes to show that even the strongest kingdoms can't escape the flow of history. The Visigothic kingdom, it rose from the ashes of the Roman Empire, thrived for centuries. But in the end, a new wave of conquerors came along, bringing a new faith, a new culture, and a new chapter in the story of Spain.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from the sack of Rome to the rise and fall of kingdoms. It's amazing to see how these so-called barbarian groups were so much more than just destroyers. They were builders, adapters, and in the end, crucial figures in shaping Europe.
It definitely challenges how we think about history, right? It reminds us that the past isn't black and white. It's full of shades of gray, unexpected events, things that don't fit into neat categories.
Totally. A big thank you to our expert for taking us on this incredible journey, and to you, our listeners, for joining us on this deep dive into history. Keep exploring and questioning. And we'll be back soon with another fascinating look at the events that shaped our world.